Okay, the day is finally here. Time to get rid of this rusty, crusty, ooey gooey, drippy oil pan. Yeah, I know people are going to complain about the frame oil filter too. I am going to say I have had every vehicle I've ever owned run hundreds and hundreds of thousands of miles with frame oil filters. I don't buy the cheapest one off the shelf, but I've never had a problem. I've never had an engine with an oily problem due to a frame oil filter. So the fact that one is on this engine doesn't concern me at all. That's their extra guard model, so it's got the reasonably good back pressure valve on it. There's one low model that they used to use, like a paper one. That was the one that was the cause for the whole internet uproar about how bad Fram is. But I am far more concerned with the amount of oil coming off of this engine. And even with it being drained, you can see it still has some drops coming out of it. The real fun thing, I did not remove that bolt. That is just missing. So, very possibly part of the problem. Wouldn't surprise me at all if some of these bolts are just entirely loose. But I will probably also pull the inspection plate off the front of the transmission and A, clean that up, and B, just clean up the bottom of the bell housing, because I'm pretty sure it's flooded with oil as well. So you got a bunch of bolts. Most of them are the same size, and then there's two at each end that have a slightly larger head. You can't see the two. Well, you might be able to see that. There's one kind of embedded in the funk in there. So we'll have to get that out. And, all right. Time to grab some tools. I need to pull the starter out first because it is obscuring a bunch of parts in the bolts, and it's obscuring the lip of the oil pan. So even if I magically got the bolts out, the pan would be stuck there between the crankshaft and bearing caps, possibly the oil pump, and the starter itself. So that's got to come out and probably get scraped. That's just nasty. It does pull strong though, so I don't need to replace it. I just need to clean it up. If it was finicky or acted up at all when starting, then I would just replace it now since I'm already yanking it. But mechanically it's fine, it's just filthy. So we'll get the engine done today and maybe tackle the oil transmission pan next weekend, and possibly pull that transfer case out since we got a slip yoke eliminator for the price of a case of beer, since it was a club member. Now, since the ask was so low, I went ahead and gave him 2 cases of beer because, you know, hey, it pays to have friends. And it's an easy thing to do, to be nice. It was a really good deal. We'll take this piece off, take out, well, the whole thing's got to come out. The shell's got to be disassembled. But basically the slip yoke eliminator kit replaces this housing, the tail housing, and it replaces, this is actually the part of the drive shaft. The output is a slip, that's why it's got this rubber on here. It'll replace this with a splined shaft with a threaded hole in it, and then you can put a yoke on it and bolt it on so that it stays intact with the case, so that if you have a drive shaft problem it doesn't slip out and leak transfer case fluid all over the place. So it's just better for the trail. And then you get a drive shaft with a slip in the drive shaft where it belongs on a Jeep. Now, the factory Rubicon case comes with no slip yoke. It comes with a fixed yoke, and from the factory it has a drive shaft with a slip in it. But what I'll probably do is also get a double cardan or a CV shaft, which will put two U-joints around here, which will reduce the total amount of angle on all of the U-joints. Since I'm going to be putting control arms in, adjustable control arms, upper and lower, I'll be able to point the pinion straight at the transfer case and get better angles all around. So that will be a good thing all around. Like I said earlier, I just have to decide if I'm going to try to do a full rebuild of this transfer case or just a straight replacement of the tail housing and rear output shaft. So that'll be something I gotta figure out. I am going to go ahead and get a cable shifter for the transfer case because that one is entirely crusty and bound up. You can't get it into four-wheel drive right now. I'm sure with some lubrication and some pressure we could get that to move, but I'm gonna keep some kind of body lift in here, and it just makes sense to me to spend a little bit of money and get that cable shifter and do it when I've got the whole bottom of this thing torn apart anyway. So, alright, time to grab some tools and start getting after it. Okay, we're going to get the starter out of the way to begin with. Part of the fun of working on the driveway, you don't get a lot of leverage on these things. And sometimes they just want to be a pain in the neck and not really give you a lot of room to work. We got that front loose. Let's see if we can get the little wrench on it. Nope. Get a little sneaky. Alright. There we go. So 15 millimeter either wrench or socket, whatever you got. Socket would honestly be faster. Once you get these loose, they should come out pretty easily. Not a lot of force on them. And this Jeep was very well lubricated from all the leaks. So I'm kind of joking, there shouldn't be any oil in the threads, but at this point it wouldn't surprise me. And yeah, an air ratchet or battery powered ratchet would be even faster if you can fit it in here, and it does look like there's plenty of room. But part of the point of my channel is you don't need a shop full of high-end tools to do a lot of this stuff. I did the first lift on my other Jeep on the driveway when there was no driveway. It was just 40 or 50-year-old broken asphalt and gravel. Did it all with basic hand tools. I don't even have electricity in my garage. I've got a power cord going to the house when I need it. So the dream would be to have a shop like Ian Johnson or Fab Rats or any of those other great channels. Stacy David, there's another guy, legend. And it'd be great to have something like that where you can just pull in and climate control, clean, smooth concrete floor, lifts, all the bells and whistles. But you don't need them. Most of the time, simple tools will get the job done. And if it's a hobby, do the right thing. You don't need to spend half your income on fancy tools that you're going to use twice. Yeah. I do like tools. I do own plenty of tools. And there are times where I'll use a project as an excuse to buy a tool that I haven't had my eyes on for a while. Like getting that exhaust apart a couple weeks ago. There's been several times where I could have used that extended grinder, extended cutoff wheel. So that was really the straw that broke the camel's back, as they say. But, you know, I've been turning wrenches as a hobby for longer than I want to say. So you accumulate. My grandfather was into this kind of stuff, and I did inherit some tools from him. But I also got wrench sets as Christmas presents through the years and stuff like that. This is important. You gotta pay attention to where stuff comes from. So, this is the upper bolt from the starter. This is the lower one. We got to do it right when we put it back together, otherwise we're going to have problems. So keep track of that stuff. I've got a magnetic tray up here. And now the starter is out. I don't know if we can see that. There we go. It's pretty nasty. That's coming from on the snout. So we're definitely going to do some cleanup on that. As far as the starter itself though, everything looks good. You know, the teeth aren't chewed up, shaft isn't chewed up. So we'll get some of the crud out of there, wipe it down real good, wipe the outside off of it, and reassemble. It ain't broke. So this is not something I'm gonna just replace just because. It's an easy enough thing to replace when it needs to be. And it's an expensive enough part that I don't need to just go ahead and replace it when I know I can get one anywhere across the country, any day of the week. And I can crawl in here and replace it in under an hour, even with the exhaust in and the skid plate in and whatever else it doesn't matter. The starters on these are very easy to get to and replace. As long as you're using stock suspension, stock style suspension anyway. The link mount for the lower link is out of the way. The upper link is over there, it's out of the way. The starter kind of sits right here. The exhaust would sit over here next to it, not below it, really. Just kind of alongside of it. So, not something I'm going to worry about replacing. Just a reminder for those that haven't seen this yet, though. The AC ports. I do have a clamp on order. Should be here. Should have already been here, I think, but not a rush. This isn't going anywhere. We'll get that fixed. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and pause this and do some cleaning. Everybody knows what cleaning is. We don't need to record that. Okay, did some cleaning. Starting to look more like a starter. Found another problem. That wiring is not in good shape. So that'll be another project for me to come in and either splice in some replacement wire or just clean that lead up and re-crimp it or whatever. Got to figure out. We'll figure that out. But whenever you're touching stuff, pay attention. Look at what you're touching. You find something like that, don't just brush it under the rug and forget about it. That is, if I'm correct, the positive trigger cable for the starter. So starter grounds to the engine, transmission. This is your hot lead coming down from the battery. Nice heavy gauge wire. This little gauge, that's what's actually triggering the relay or the solenoid to send power to the starter motor. So it doesn't need to pass a lot of current, but it has to pass it reliably. And if it's frayed like this, that's not going to be all that reliable, and it's probably getting corroded. So eventually it'll just separate or disconnect electrically. And if that doesn't happen, it may also ground itself out to the starter body or to the engine or something else and spark. You get enough sparks with all this miscellaneous oil and transmission fluid, well, sooner or later you could have a fire. Sparks belong inside the engine, not next to it. So we'll have to get after that.